kind of a note to self. A lot of the so-called selfing, which has to do with the illusion of there being a self, but there is no illusory self, nor is there an illusory no self, nor is there a real no self. But a lot of the self-talk in the head, but this is just a term, and it's actually kind of a lacking term to call the self-talk, but to call the head talk self-talk only because, I mean, ultimately it has to do with the self, the seeming self, that I am here as a thinker, etc., doer, chooser. I am behind these thoughts that appear, I control this. All that is just empty thought, but the way, like at first it gets the illusion, at least in the language, gets kind of revealed when there's a noticing of all those self and me referential thoughts quite, and they appear quite blatantly at first, but like in mental images and language, thoughts, memories, comprehension. But then when that starts to be caught, and this is already a little bit misleading because there's no real activity of someone trying to catch thoughts, because the catcher would be, and the one on the spiritual path, or the one trying to catch thoughts and mental images, is just another empty thought. But the blatant self-reference seems to kind of end, and it just, the mental landscape seems to, the thinking seems to have to do with others, and it seems to mask itself behind worry about others and the well-being about others, but it's not somehow noticed that even that is not real, and that those are just empty thoughts. It's empty thinking going on. So with those thoughts there usually is, at least quote unquote for me, probably for apparent others too, mind seems to be the same everywhere, like the human mind, apparent human mind. Not that there is an everywhere, something called everywhere or anywhere. So the me talk seems to end, the me yap and the me images, like the very blatant ones. But even when there's apparent thinking about other and the outside world, it's somehow always referring back to the thinker and the experiencer and the one that is here as a separate entity. But that one, that sense of the one, is somehow produced by mentations, even though it's not blatantly appearing that there is like me thoughts, or me and my, and about me and blah blah blah, what I think about others. Like this me is not at the center of things at first glance, but it actually is behind the scenes all the time. So it would be maybe a good habit, not that anyone adopts this habit or does this habit, because there isn't anyone really as a separate doer, since this seems to be like an empty dream. Everything seems to be an empty dream. Not a night dream, but not very different from a night dream. Empty phenomena appearing to appear without any kind of a separate self, or without any kind of a self. So the habit that I mentioned would be like, every time any kind of a mental image appears to present a reality about other people, for example, or about the world, or about anything, there could be a note, like a mental note. Hey, this is the thought. This is an empty thought without a thinker. Or this is an empty mental image. These are kind of interchangeable, like mental images and language thoughts both have to do with meaning, but the meaning is empty, and the language and the images are empty. So that has to do with the mindfulness that I've talked about before, and quote unquote for me, or quote unquote here, neither is true, but how else to point this out like this, express this. Not that there's an expressor even, but for me, that stuff had gone under the radar. But also, like, this is part of that empty illusion that seems to try to produce a sense of self. Like, this idea and sense that comes with the idea that there's someone here doing this, reminding themselves about everything being an empty thought. I mean, this is also an empty thought. So this kind of a habit. Anything that seems to say anything about anything, or anything that seems to look like anything relating to the world, relating to reality, relating to mundane everyday life, relating to anything, is actually just a thought, a mental comprehension based on certain kinds of mentations, but first and foremost memory, and then projection, imagination. And it's all empty. Nobody actually does it, but merely conceptually there being an apparent understanding of this does nothing. It doesn't affect anything. Not that there's anything really affecting anything ultimately in a like a subject object sense. There's a lot of apparent affecting all the time. Everything is an effect, everything is a flow in this show, in this dream show, yeah, but it's empty. And this too is a mental image, a thought, an empty thought. So stuff can start to be dismissed like this. I mean, it doesn't mean that the body becomes inert and stops eating and stops taking care of things, apparently. That's not the point, and it's not the effect there either, unless there's some kind of a misunderstanding. I mean, suicides can occur apparently in, well, like when, for example, Buddha talked about similar stuff, there were some people around him that misunderstood what he said and they committed suicides. But again, this is just another thought. It's an empty memory, apparent memory. Just another empty thought, just another mental image. So this kind of a habit, and nobody who has adopted this habit, that would be just another thought, an empty thought, empty mental idea. What is even mentality? I don't know, but empty idea, empty thought, empty mental image. So yeah, what else? What to say? What else to say? I don't know.